Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. I'm happy for you. With a bit of luck, this will all be over soon enough, and you can have whatever life you decide. Just don't forget about us. Leo snorted. Never. I'll always be around so long as you can put up with me. I've got you all, and Cass, I might not be a black, but you're the only family I've got. Harry nodded appreciatively. Aye, he mocked, I'd do the same for you as I would any of the others. Leo smiled gratefully. So, what's next? Harry sighed in frustration. Another meeting with Dumbledore. I need to have a discussion with him about Malfoy and explain my latest plan. He won't like it, but he can lump it as far as I'm concerned. It's my way or he can keep out of it. Aye. He's a damned liability, that one. If you need me for anything, let me know. I will, Harry assured him before leaving the room. Leo yawned as he cleared his plate with a wave of his wand and levitated it towards the sink. Today had been a good day overall. Katie had woken, and if what Harry said was true, the war could soon be at an end. He knew not exactly what his friend had planned, but the boy was meticulous, if nothing else. He had no doubt that he would be successful, and if he was fortunate, both Malfoys would also be dealt with. With that final thought warming him, he climbed into bed for a well-needed rest, his eyes closing only seconds after he had hit the pillow. Once again, Harry found himself within the office of the headmaster, sat opposite the man himself. It was a strange feeling to be associating with Dumbledore, someone whom he had done all he could the previous year to avoid. Now the two had become somewhat allies in the pursuit of putting an end to Tom, though both had differing opinions on just how that should be done. Dumbledore believed that patience was required lest mistakes were made on their part, potentially but inadvertently extending the conflict. Harry believed the opposite to be the better option, particularly now with the knowledge he had gathered from Lucius Malfoy. It makes sense to strike sooner. He knows that the Horcruxes are missing. Lucius said himself. He had been furious when he learnt of what had happened to the diary, and he certainly wouldn't choose one of the riskiest to achieve unless it was necessary. I'm certain he knows that the ring and necklace are missing, and without Bellatrix and the Lestrange brothers incapable, he can't get to the cup. Dumbledore sighed as he nodded. I suspect that you are right, Harry, he conceded. What is it you intend on doing? That is for me to know, Dumbledore, Harry replied firmly. I came only to inform you that I intended to put an end to this sooner rather than later. Dumbledore could only nod his understanding. Then I wish you well in your endeavor. The fate of Wizarding Britain depends on it. Harry snorted, ignoring the reference to the prophecy. He'd accepted that there may be a kernel of truth to it, but he refused to acknowledge anything further. Did you know that Draco had been tasked with killing you? Severus did bring it to my attention. And you did nothing to prevent the attempt? Dumbledore deflated. I had hoped the boy would see the error of his ways. I know that were he to fail, Tom would punish him most harshly. So, instead, you allowed him to try. Katie was almost killed because of your reluctance to deal with him. Had she have done, Draco would have been the least of your worries. Where is he anyway? Severus will arrive with him shortly. I ask that you do not attempt to harm him. As headmaster of this school, I will be compelled to offer what protection I can to him. Harry chuckled. If I do not fear Tom, who truly wants me dead, I certainly do not fear you, Dumbledore. Draco will not be harmed, that I can promise you. He still has a purpose to serve, one that may just save his life. I truly wish it had not come to this, Dumbledore lamented. Being a pawn in a war is no place for a boy. Neither is attempted murder. But here we are. Had Draco not been so keen to join Tom, he could have escaped all this unscathed. You reap what you sow, Dumbledore. You should know that by now, I am making full use of an advantage I hold. Nothing more. The headmaster had no reply for the words spoken, and the two waited in silence until a knock on the door sounded. At Dumbledore's bidding, it opened to reveal the potions master and a very nervous Draco Malfoy, who paled even further when he spotted the Lord Black seated only a short distance away. Draco, Lord Black has requested the chance to speak with you, Dumbledore announced to the now shaking boy. The boy nodded nervously, trying to conceal his apprehension behind a look of indifference. I know what you have been up to, Draco, Harry declared. Voldemort has given you the task of killing Dumbledore. Malfoy paled, but Harry continued before he could deny the accusations. Unfortunately for you, you have failed, and someone close to me was caught up and almost killed by your efforts. I haven't done anything, Malfoy denied. You can't prove it. Are you calling your father a liar? My father. We had quite a productive discussion recently, and he has agreed to help me. Draco shook his head in denial. You're lying. My father would never help you. Ordinarily, no, Harry agreed. But when I told him that I would kill you, he became rather compliant. As we speak, he is carrying out a task for me, and you will do the same. If you refuse, I will kill your mother, your father, and will burn your home to ground, and then I will let Lord Wayland decide your fate. He knows that it was you that almost killed Katie. What kind of punishment do you think he would demand? I've done nothing wrong, Draco almost wailed desperately. Leave my mother and father alone. Denying it will not help. Do so again and I will tear through your mind and get a confession that way. The fate of your mother and father is up to you. If you help me, then perhaps one or both will survive. No, you're lying to me, Malfoy denied once more. Harry removed a small object and held it out to Draco. Is this not your family ring? The one that sits on your father's finger? Draco snatched it from Harry's grip and stared at it wide-eyed. How did you get this? He demanded. From Lucius, of course. He wasn't willing to part with it, but he understood your need to see the truth. So will you help me, Draco, or would you like to begin planning the funeral of both your parents? Malfoy looked helplessly between Snape and Dumbledore, the latter not meeting his stare and a look of discomfort marring his features. The former remained as impassive as ever, and Draco addressed him furiously. You're a traitor, he accused. You've turned your back on the Dark Lord. Only after he turned on me, Snape spat. Can you not see, boy, the Dark Lord is finished. He is nothing but a shadow of what he once was. He relies on potions that cannot repair the damage he has done to himself. He has lost. Don't be a fool all your life, Draco. Malfoy shook his head as he backed away. I didn't want this, he sobbed. I only wanted to make my father proud. I thought I could do it, but it just got harder and harder. Then do the right thing, Harry interjected. Help me put an end to him, and then you may be able to salvage something of your family. He'll kill me. He'll kill my mother and father. Harry sighed as he stepped towards the boy. You have proven to be a spoilt, vile little shit, and your father much, much worse. I cannot promise I will save him, but I will do what I can for your mother. She is a Black after all. My mother? Harry nodded. It is the best I can do for you, Draco. Take the opportunity I am giving you and be grateful. By rights I should be killing you all. I am giving you the chance to live. Is he telling the truth? Draco questioned Snape. He is, he confirmed. Draco released a deep breath before nodding his agreement. Good, Harry declared. Your part in this is the easiest. James Potter shifted the pile of parchment on his desk, cursing that he had accepted Arcturus Black's idea of becoming the Minister of Magic. For the most part, he spent his days cooped up in his office, dealing with mundane things his subordinates should be capable. He despised this aspect of his job, but it would only be temporary. When Voldemort was dealt with and any wayward Death Eaters brought to justice, he would leave the post, content with what had been achieved. Until then, he could tolerate monotony of the paperwork, the people trying to kiss ass to elevate their own positions, and the endless Wizengamot meetings being called. It had been 3 months since the Dark Lord or any of his followers had been spotted, 3 months of paper pushing and running the country, something he was not enjoying. Occasionally, when the chance arose, he would join the Aurors on their patrols, somewhere he was much more comfortable. When it was the right time, he would rejoin the ranks. He missed some of his colleagues, and he missed being in the thick of the action. Being minister came with a lot of prestige, but such a thing was frivolous to James Potter. It truly meant nothing to the man. He paused his task as he spotted a letter with a familiar scrawl, one that had only become so recently. Since Charlie had been killed, Harry had kept his word to the boy and had been a frequent guest for dinner and had given himself and Lily the chance to get to know him. It had been quite strange and awkward at first, but progress was being made, even if it was slowly. Along with the dinners, he would write. To Lily mostly, but he had written to James also. Such a gesture had warmed the couple, and it felt as though they had their son back in a way. He opened the envelope of the latest missive and began to read. It was a short and simple note, one that filled him with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "It will come to an end soon. Be ready. LOL." James nodded, his mind whirring with the implications of the letter and just what it meant. Harry was not one to share specifics, and all James could do was as he had been advised. Gathering his cloak, he exited the office via the flue to do just that, though he didn't know exactly what it was he needed to do to be ready. With a frown, he sent off a Petranis to one of the very few people he trusted. If Harry had instructed him to be ready, he meant ensure the auras would be too. For that, he needed to speak to Bones and Moody also, and then play the waiting game. Harry would let him know when he was needed. "Are you sure about this plan, Harry?" Harry released a deep breath. "It's the best chance we have. I know it's risky, but what choice do we have? I saw an opportunity and took it." Arcturus nodded slowly. "You did well. I don't trust Malfoy, however. The man is a coward and will likely get cold feet." "It's a possibility," Harry agreed. "At worst, it will only be the snake left, and Tom, as he is, will not be drawn into an open fight, not until he is certain he has a chance." "No, he will not," Arcturus sighed. "Have you thought everything through?" "I have. If everything goes to plan, he will be gone within the week, and then it is just a case of rounding up the Death Eaters. James will have the auras nearby to do just that." "It's a good plan," Arcturus murmured. "Are you certain it will not be detected?" "Positive," Harry declared. "The magic is too similar to that of both the diadem and the Horcrux. He will not be aware of it until it is too late." "Okay," Arcturus relented. "I do wish you would reconsider yourself going. Too many things can go wrong. It has to be me. The only people I trust enough are not ones I would put in this position. He is mine to kill anyway." Arcturus smirked at the stubbornness of the boy. There was that black determination shining through. Harry had made his decision and there would be no changing his mind. "Very well, I will coordinate with Potter and be there should you need it." "Thank you," Harry returned gratefully, offering the man a bow before taking his leave. The events to come and possible setbacks had been plaguing his mind the past few days, and he needed the reassurance of his grandfather that it was not a foolish endeavor or that he had missed anything vital. As ever, he had been as precise as possible, leaving room for error if such a thing were to occur. With the blessing of his grandfather, he was ready. All that was needed now was a message from Lucius Malfoy to inform him that his part had been done. Then, he could finally put this chapter of his life behind him, and the spirit of his brother could rest peacefully knowing that Tom had paid for his crimes against them. "Mother?" Draco greeted in surprise as he arrived at the Shrieking Shack to find her waiting for him. "Where is father?" "He is waiting for me to bring him the item. Lord Black was very firmly against the two of you seeing each other until all of this is over." Draco nodded as he pulled the woman into a tight embrace. "What are we going to do?" he questioned. Narcissa gave a teary smile as her son held her tight to him. He had been but a boy the last time he had shown any affection towards her. "We do as Lord Black has asked of us. Your father is in agreement, Draco. I can promise you that. Our priority is to keep you safe, my son." "And then what? We get our revenge later?" Narcissa shook her head. "It would be foolish to try, to our detriment. Your father didn't allow you to learn much of your other family. The Malfoys cannot hope to stand against the might of the Blacks, Draco. Even your father can see that through his own pride." "So we let them win?" the teen questioned angrily. "We've already lost," Narcissa corrected. "Our wealth, our influence, and our power are all gone." "Father wouldn't allow it," Draco denied. "He has already conceded, but he wanted me to pass on a message to you. He says that his final wish is that you listen and do as he asks." Draco swallowed deeply as he nodded. He says that when the time is right, sell the house and the items of worth within. It will give you enough money to begin replenishing the family fortune. Borgin and the goblins will be able to help you with that. He wishes for you to find a pure-blood girl to continue the line and to learn from the mistakes that he has made. He suggests you read the journals of your grandfather Abraxas and become a better man than he did. Is father going to die? Narcissa could only shrug in response. We can only hope not. He has been put in a difficult position, Draco. He just wants to be certain that everything has been covered in the event of that eventuality. As the tears began to fall, Narcissa pulled her son close to her once more, running her fingers through his hair as she had done when he was a babe. I don't want him to die, the boy choked. Neither do I, Draco, Narcissa whispered. He loves you so very much. He has doted on you since you came into this world. He's likely never said it, but you are the thing he is most proud of. Draco nodded into her chest. I need to take it to him, Draco. I want you to return to the school and stay there until you hear from myself or your father. Is that understood? Yes, mother, the boy responded uneasily. Good. I will be in touch as soon as possible. With her parting words, Narcissa retrieved the box her son had brought and exited the shack, fighting back the sob that threatened to break free before apparating away. The Dark Lord was losing patience. It seemed like hours ago that Lucius had informed him that Draco had retrieved the diadem successfully from the room of hidden things within the castle. He had immediately sent the man to fetch it, his own preparations having been completed for some time. Enter, he barked, as a tapping at the door interrupted his thoughts. A very nervous Lucius crossed the threshold with a small box in hand. He cleared the distance between himself and his master quickly and fell to one knee. My lord, as promised, Draco has acquired what you asked for. And he did not touch it? He assures me he did not, my lord. Voldemort nodded. I am inclined to believe you, Lucius. Had he done, your weak son would likely not have survived the night. My son listens to me, my lord. He would not defy an order from you. I am pleased to hear it, Lucius. Perhaps you and your offspring are not as useless as I had begun to believe. Now leave me. Ensure that I am not disturbed. I will send for you when needed. Of course, my lord, Malfoy complied with a bow before scrambling from the room. After the man had fled, the Dark Lord placed the box upon the desk and opened the lid to reveal something he had not seen in over 5 decades. The diadem itself was valuable for the materials used to craft it, but it was what it housed that made it more so. There was no amount of gold in existence that could entice him to part with it, though even if he did, it would undoubtedly return to his possession one way or the other. Levitating it from the box, he placed it into the center of the floor where he had been meticulously carving the required runes over the past few days. It had been dull, laborious work, but would prove to be fruitful. He began by drawing out a quart of blood from his arm, before filling the runes with the viscous liquid, and with a sigh sealed the wound. Now it begins, he muttered as he sat, gripped the diadem and activated the array of symbols surrounding him. You're certain it's going to be tonight, aren't you? Tonks asked worriedly. I can feel it, Harry replied, his mind already focused on the enormity of the task before him. Draco has delivered what he needs. It's only a matter of time. Tonks nodded. I don't like this, Harry. Please at least take someone with you. No one else will fit under the cloak. Taking someone else only doubles the risk of being caught before I can get to him, Dora. It has to be me alone. If anything goes wrong, I couldn't have that on my conscience. And what about mine? The woman bit back. Do you think I could live knowing I let you go? Let me, Harry replied with a raised brow. Tonks stood confidently, staring him in the eyes for a moment before speaking once more. If you felt for me even close to what I do for you, you wouldn't this if I asked you. I know you wouldn't. Harry smirked at the woman, proud she was standing up to him, but also amused. But you wouldn't ask me not to, he pointed out. You know how much killing him means to me, he sighed, as he took her hand in his own. But you're right, if you did ask me not to, I wouldn't, for you. Tonks smiled as she shook her head at him. No, I wouldn't ask you, but I'm scared, Harry. I'm scared of losing you and I'm scared of being alone again." Harry gave her a chaste kiss as he cupped her cheek. "Do you trust me?" "Of course." "Then trust me when I tell you that I will come back to you. Trust me when I tell you I have every intention of marrying you when this is over with." Tonks raised an amused eyebrow in his direction. "So you have no interest in seeing what other matches are out there?" Harry recoiled dramatically and grabbed his chest. "I'm offended you think so little of me," he chuckled. Tonks hummed as she narrowed her eyes at him. "And what makes you so sure I'd want to marry a git like you?" "You said yourself you wouldn't want to be without me," he pointed out. "I suppose that is true," she conceded. "If you mean it, then a lot of people will not be happy. And why would I care about anyone else? I care about you and me. If anyone has a problem with it, then they can take it up with me." Tonks laughed at his defiance and stubbornness. For many, such traits would be infuriating, but she liked that about him. When he set his mind to it, there was nothing he couldn't achieve, and his stubbornness was a big part of that. "That is, if you'll have me," he continued, the vulnerable side of him rarely seen showing through. Tonks pulled him into an embrace. "Of course, I'll have you, you idiot. There's no one that could ever be what you are to me, Harry." She felt him smile against her neck and it warmed her heart. Recently any smile from him had been absent, his mind occupied by the events of the past year. For many it would have broken them. But Harry had proven to be stronger than most, his resilience, his determination and his need of closure pushing him on. She was proud of him, prouder than she had ever been of anyone. After all the adversity he had faced and overcome, he had grown into a great young man, one that would continue to do so. He suddenly stiffened in her arms and gently pushed her away. "It's time," he whispered as he waved his wand and summoned all that he would need this night. For a minute or so he busied himself with sending off the necessary messages to ensure all those that were required would be there waiting for their own opportunity to strike. For now, however, he would be alone. It would be just him and Tom, the way it was always supposed to be. "James will send for you, Dora," he explained hurriedly. "You will be kept out of the property until I manage to destroy the wards and put up my own. Can I please come with you? I can disguise myself as a Death Eater." Harry shook his head as he took her hand. "I can't have that distraction. I know you're more than capable of handling yourself, but there could be hundreds of them in there. I can't risk you being in there with me." Tonks nodded reluctantly. "Have I never kept a promise to you?" he asked. "No, you've always kept them. And I will keep this one." She released a deep breath before replying. "I don't doubt you, Harry. Just make sure this isn't one the first and only that you do break." "I will," he declared before giving her a final kiss and vanishing with a gentle pop. He arrived in the Wiltshire countryside with the taste and scent of the girl still on his lips. It served only to steel his resolve. Perhaps he had been preoccupied with what had happened to his brother, but he was here now and here to put an end to the cause of his misery. Tonks understood that he needed to do it, and why. She understood him better than any ever had. Shaking the thoughts of the girl away, he pressed forward, doing his best to not disturb the undergrowth on the approach to the manor. A short distance away, there would be little reason for Tom to have sentries, but Harry was not willing to risk it. It would be foolish to do so and be caught out by something so trivial after all. Reaching the ward line, he checked to ensure that the cloak was covering every part of him before stepping through and pausing. None of the other manors he had breached had been protected by such an extent of wards, and this was the first time he had not been completely certain in the capabilities of it. Lucius had told him himself that the wards here were old, powerful, and none had ever successfully gotten through and lived to tell the tale. The cloak, however, seemingly proved once more that no ward could detect it. Still, he did not understand the magic fully imbued into the fabric, but he would not question the advantage he had gave him. Seeing that none had been alerted to his presence, he approached the western wall of the building and tapped his wand 3 times against the brick closest the bay window as indicated by the Lord of the Lands. He was relieved when an opening formed, revealing a servant's passage, no longer in use, since the Malfoys had begun to use elves instead. The inside was full of dust and cobwebs as one would expect, but Harry ignored them, only removing the debris with a wave of his wand as he reached the top of the passage that should take into a disused room on the second floor of the large house. He braced himself and held his wand aloft after tapping another brick that caused a small door to pop open in front of him with a click. True to the word of the Malfoy patriarch, the room was not in use, any furniture within having been covered with white sheets that had too accumulated a layer of dust during the years they had been left. Doubling the silencing and scent-marking charms on himself, he crossed the room and cracked the door just open, that he could hear any sounds from within the hall on the side. This would be the riskiest part of the evening, making his way to the other side of the manor without being detected. Lucius had not been able to give a definitive answer as to how many Death Eaters and followers of the Dark Lord were here at one time. The only thing the man could be certain of was that there was a considerable number. Wizards and witches would not be his only problem. Tom indeed had not been idle in his absence. Recruitment had been slow for the man, but he had managed to convince a number of werewolves to join him. Hearing nothing concerning, he exited the room and pulled the door gently closed, his eyes darting around the long hall he found himself in. It was no secret that the Malfoys had been a wealthy family, and the decor did nothing to detract from that notion. The floor was constructed entirely of marble, and the pillars reaching all the way to the ceiling far above had been crafted in the same vein. Portraits and landscapes lined the walls as far as the eye could see, and the furniture was made of only the finest woods and metals available. If style and elegance denoted power, the Malfoys would be at the top of the list of the very best. Harry had no time for such pomp. He had been raised amongst the grandeur and luxury of the Blacks, and that was more than enough for him. He couldn't imagine living somewhere like this, and certainly would find no joy in it. For the most part, he was of a simpler disposition. He had once resided in a damned cupboard, so frivolities such as what was on display did nothing for him. With a shake of his head, he continued on his way, carefully navigating the twisting and turning halls of the home. By the time he had reached only a quarter of the way to his destination, he'd had to avoid being walked into twice by oncoming Death Eaters. One, a large group of unpleasant-looking men and women. He managed to duck into a narrow crevice that was thankfully devoid of anything within. Had it not been, he would have been discovered. He released a deep breath he had held as they passed him by, none of them wise to the danger that lurked so close to them. When they had left the vicinity, he pressed on, glad that Lucius had the foresight to deliver the diadem later in the evening. Had he not, the task before him would be that more daunting. Again, he found himself having to press himself flat against the wall, as this time, a lone Death Eater approached him, coming the opposite way, muttering under his breath about the cramped conditions they had to endure. So lost in his own thoughts, he too did not realize the potential danger he was in as he passed, but a few inches away from the teen who was ready to put the man down if needed. Once more Harry continued towards his destination, thankful that the others within the house were seemingly occupied elsewhere. After more close calls than he was comfortable with, he arrived at a large oak door inscribed with the Malfoy coat of arms. This, Lucius explained, was the family wing, the set of rooms that he'd vacated for the Dark Lord to occupy. Housed within the next corridor should be 6 rooms, the furthest away being where he would hopefully find Tom, alone. He gave a cursory glance around before entering the hall and closing and locking the door behind him with a gentle hiss. None would come beyond this point without him knowing. Thankfully, the hall had no guards. Evidently, Tom felt secure enough within the home to have no need of them, a mistake that would cost him. As he reached the door that separated him from his foe, he braced himself once more before pushing it open, grinning at the sight that he was met with. For all intents and purposes, it appeared that his plan had worked. Doubled over and wincing in pain was the man that had caused much of his own. "Hello, Tom," he greeted as he removed his cloak and pushed the door closed, sealing it with a hiss, just as he had the other. The Dark Lord glared at him in return and reached for the wand just out of his reach. The runes began to fade, and he fell on all fours, gasping for breath. At some point during the ritual he had been hoisted to his feet, though he had been unaware of the development. His knees hurt from where they had collided with the marble floor, and it took him several moments to catch his bearings, his head spinning as the magic pumped through his veins. After what must have been several minutes, his equilibrium righted itself, and he managed to pull himself to his feet without relieving himself of the contents of his stomach. Overall, the experience had not been as debilitating as he had expected, and he felt invigorated, better than he ever had these past 14 years. He could feel his magic more clearly, a fog that he did not know existed lifted from within his mind. He felt more like he once had, the successful returning of his soul fragment tempering him. It was serene almost, calming the thoughts and worries that had plagued him. Once again he felt untouchable. He retrieved his first wand from the desk where it rested, the warmth of it reminiscent of the very first time he held it when he was 11 years old and preparing to enter his first year at Hogwarts. With a flick, the tip illuminated brightly without hesitation, and it brought the first genuine smile to his lips for many years. Even when he had regained a body after such an absence, it had not filled him with such joy. The joy, however, was short-lived. The first indication that something had gone awry was with a sudden tightness in his chest, excruciating enough for him to lose grip on his wand as he clutched at his heart. Only a few seconds later he once again found himself on his knees, fighting to simply breathe as the constriction increased, causing his breaths to become desperate. Knowing he needed assistance, he began crawling towards his wand to send for help, only to be stopped in his tracks by an unwelcome and familiar voice. It could only be one persona capable enough of entering the property, as he had many others, and only one of two that had the audacity to address him by the filthy name his mother had given him. "Hello, Tom." The Dark Lord glared at the teen, equally furious as he was fearful in his vulnerable state. It was then that his world began crashing down around him, the realization of what had been done set in. This had been orchestrated by the smug boy stood before him. He had made no error in his work, it had been sabotaged. Coward, he managed to wheeze through pained breaths as he lunged for the wand still a foot away. He never reached it, but a scream of his own rent the air as his hand was pulverized by a curse, courtesy of the boy. "I don't think you are one to throw that word around lightly, Tom," Harry chastised. "Twice you had the opportunity to face me, and twice it was you that fled." Voldemort coughed as he laughed. "A true hero," he snarked. "I have no intention of being a hero. I want you dead. It doesn't matter to me how, so long as I get to do it. So, you choose the most cowardly way by killing a defenseless man. I like to think I got my inspiration from you, Tom. I doubt you've ever given anyone a fair fight in your life. Why do you deserve one?" The Dark Lord had no response. Instead, he tried to immolate the boy with his scarlet eyes. "Tell me, what do I have to gain from engaging in a duel with you? I might win or I might lose. Why would I risk my family legacy by being so foolish? You have more than 5 decades of experience on me. You have undergone May rituals, and I have no shame in admitting you are an excellent wizard. Why do something so stupid when I have much to live for?" "You would be revered above all others should you beat me," Voldemort offered. Harry snorted. "I see no value in such a thing," he shrugged. "I am the Lord Black. The continuation of my line means more than my own legacy. I have a beautiful woman waiting for me to return to her, and people that need me. I will not risk their safety and their happiness by allowing you a chance to kill me. That is the one thing you underestimated, Tom. Pure bloods will always do what is needed for the sake of their line. Lucius did, and that is why you are where you are now." Voldemort hissed furiously as the level of deception was revealed to him. Harry ignored the man as he approached and kicked him onto his back. "What did you do to me?" the Dark Lord panted. Harry smirked, reveling in the pain and misery of the man before answering. "When you demanded the return of one of your Horcruxes, I gathered that you would likely try to reincorporate back with yourself. Even if you didn't, my own work would have made the one I gave you useless. It was quite a stroke of genius if I do say so myself. I imbued the diadem with a series of binding curses, spells that you would have overlooked had you checked them. They were almost identical to the ones you yourself placed on it to house your soul within. What you are feeling now is what I did until my own magic was unbound. Your magic is no longer available to you unless I was to die. I took that little bit of inspiration from the curse Crouch used on Dora when she was under the lake. Though I suspect he learnt such a curse from yourself. Voldemort gritted his teeth as another wave of agony washed over him. And I wouldn't worry about your other Horcruxes, Tom. The ring, the diary, the cup, the necklace, the snake, and even the one you left in me have all been dealt with. I think the world will be a much better place without you in it. Voldemort's eyes widened as his remaining safeguards were listed, the fear within him increasing tenfold. Anyway, I have nothing else to say to you, Tom. I gave you the chance to allow myself and my brother to walk away, and you chose the other option. Now all that's left is for me to fulfill my promise to you. What promise? Voldemort asked fearfully. Oh, didn't any of your followers pass on the message? Harry questioned as he drew a dagger from within his sleeve. My first day in the Wizengamot, I told them that I was coming for you, that you would suffer and that I would carve your heart out before you die. I think I might keep it in a jar. That seems rather suitable for a black, don't you think? Any fight the man may have been able to muster was subdued as the blade sunk into his chest to the hilt, the scream dying in his throat as it filled with blood. He's been in there a while, the voice of Moody growled in the darkness. He's fine, Tonks whispered. If he wasn't, we'd know. He wouldn't go down quietly. Moody agreed. The group fell silent once more, the entire Aura Force and every able member of the Order of the Phoenix waiting for the signal to begin mopping up the Death Eaters within the manor. Harry had been firm in his instructions. None were to attempt to enter without his signal. It would be his life at risk, were they not to comply. James had firm control over the Ministry forces, none daring to disobey the orders he had given. He may now be the minister, but there were few willing to put themselves in the wrong end of the man's wand. The silence became deafening as it stretched on, those lying in wait growing restless during their vigil. Such peace, however, came to a loud and abrupt end. A strange whistling sound could be heard from around them, causing the Mehmed women to be on high alert. The intensity of the noise increased until it screeched, causing many to cover their ears in discomfort. When it appeared that it couldn't possibly get any louder, the ground beneath their feet trembled and the sound ceased. A split second later found them scrambling to their feet, the shock wave of the collapsing wards having sent them sprawling. The signal, an aura shouted, pointing towards the manor in the distance. With me, James roared, let none escape. Following his lead, the gathered men and women charged towards the house, ready to bring an end to the conflict that had reigned over their shores. Many were fighting for the loved ones waiting for them at home, others for glory and for the peace they sought. No matter the reason, they were motivated, determined to put an end to the threat of the Dark Lord and his followers once and for all. The sound of spellfire reached them as they neared, shouts of anger and pain following soon after, and that of doors being flung open as those within tried to flee the house, the safety of the wards no longer protecting them. Take them down, James ordered as a large group of men and women poured from the house, some in a state of undress, panicked by the sudden need to abandon their retreat. Seemingly they hadn't had time to prepare for the attack, as many fell without resistance. Those that did put up a fight were overwhelmed quickly, their lack of organization being their downfall. Still, bodies continued to pour out of the doors of the house, and eventually those that remained became wise to the tactics being used against them. Quickly and efficiently, some more seasoned men and women took charge, and the Death Eaters managed to erect something resembling an effective defense. Once situated, they returned spellfire, putting the forces of the Auras and the Order on the back foot. Tonks peered across her own lines, spotting the likes of Moody and Potter relentlessly firing spells towards their adversaries, and Dumbledore doing all he could to defend himself and those around him, reluctant to attack as he had always been. The force of the Dark Lord began to steadily grow as the two groups traded spells, those still making their exit being drawn to the safety of their comrades that had huddled together and created some makeshift barricades. There was, however, nowhere for them to run. They were cornered animals, and cornered animals were at their most dangerous. Tonks did all she could to bring an end to the fight. Curse after curse and spell after spell left her wand, felling many, It seemed, however, that any that fell were immediately replaced with another to take their place, the number of people within having been considerably underestimated. "Hold firm," James Potter shouted as he continued his own work, noticing the morale of their forces slowly becoming depleted as more of their own fell to the retaliation of the Death Eaters. Tonks redoubled her efforts, bringing a man screaming to the ground with a well-placed piercing hex. She had no time to celebrate, however, as a barrage was sent her way. She deflected one spell and rolled to avoid another before erecting a shield and returning fire with a spell of Harry's own creation. A bolt of green lighting shot from her wand and collided with her attacker's chest, tearing a scream from his lungs as his tongue and eyes exploded. She followed up with another spell, this one bursting her target's ears and rupturing his testicles. Harry had explained that these spells had been created in error when he had been working on other things. However, they had proven to be quite useful, the results cringeworthy and a stern warning to any that would consider engaging with any throwing around such magic. Moody gave her a nod of appreciation as the fighting continued. It did so in what could only be described as a stalemate, neither the Death Eaters nor Auras able to seize any advantage against the other. But both sides fought on regardless, one wanting to subdue and capture the other, the opposing group wanting to escape that had been sprung on them. A sudden coldness enveloped the grounds, and it had little to do with the chilly December night. A gentle mist rolled in as a shrieking could be heard somewhere in the distance. "What the bloody hell is that?" someone questioned. "Dementors," Moody growled, readying his wand. Such a move proved to be unnecessary, as when the creatures emerged from behind the manor, a blinding light followed them and chased them away from the conflict. Blinking away the blind spots, Tonk's vision cleared just as the front door of the manor was blasted open and a figure emerged from within, stilling the violence between the groups. "Harry," she whispered, relieved to see him well. With his work done, he shrunk down his new trophy and pocketed it before covering himself in the cloak once more and exiting the room. His next stop was the Wardstone, the location of which having been reluctantly provided by Lucius Malfoy. To access it, he needed to reach the level above and locate the hidden room that stored all the items the Ministry would be very interested in getting their hands on. Harry cared not for these. As a Black, he too had items that would be any Aura's big break should they happen across them. Carefully, not wanting to draw attention to himself at this crucial stage, he left the family wing and climbed the stairs, a short distance away, grateful that whoever resided within the house had seemingly turned in for the night. Checking his watch, he was surprised to see how long this part of his task had taken. 2 hours had almost passed since he entered the property, the small setbacks he had faced accumulating into a considerable amount of elapsed time. Calming himself, he reached the required door and pressed the Malfoy ring against the lock. The gentle click sounded like a gunshot at the ding of the night, and he hurriedly crossed the threshold before closing the door behind him. He found himself in an opulent office. The wooden furniture matched the rest that could be found throughout the house, but where the floor elsewhere was made of marble, this room was carpeted with a thick pile and the walls adorned with many portraits of Malfoy lords past. He froze them with a wave of his wand and approached the desk. Pressing the ring against an innocuous metal ring underneath, another click sounded and a portion of the carpet in the center of the room lifted to reveal a descending staircase. "Clever," Harry commented as he made his way down, lighting the tip of his wand as the darkness engulfed him. Within was an array of books and trinkets that would be at home within the Black Vault. Carefully, so not to even brush against any, he navigated his way through the eclectic assortment until he came upon the wall at the rear of the room. For the final time, he used the ring to access a hidden nook that opened to reveal a large black stone. He groaned as he spotted the collection of glowing runes carved into it, most of which he did not recognize. One could say what they would about the Malfoys, but there was no doubting the seriousness in which they took their security. Harry had never seen such a construct. It left him unashamedly baffled as to how to proceed. His knowledge of runes may have been lacking, but his ability in practical magic was not. Tentatively, he pressed the Elder Wand against the stone, urging it to overwhelm the protective magic. An ominous ringing began to sound, piercing the air around him. It grew louder and louder and the runes brighter as Harry fought against the magic, the wand and himself being pushed to the limits. The screeching became so high-pitched that he was certain his ears were bleeding, but eventually his determination won out and he was flung across the room from the pressure of the wards collapsing. Fortunately, he had only dislodged a shelf of books, none that had left him any worse for wear. His efforts, however, had not gone unnoticed. A cacophony of sound ranging from crashing footsteps, raised voices and doors opening had begun, those within the house having been roused by the noise. Evidently the fools were confused as spellfire began shortly after. He couldn't be certain if they were fighting amongst themselves in the heat of the moment or had resorted to their usual tactic of simply attacking first. To Harry it mattered not. He needed to leave and assist the waiting auras outside the building. The numbers within the home had clearly been inaccurate, and he could not help but think they would be overwhelmed if the Death Eaters fought as a cohesive unit. Pulling himself to his feet, he climbed the stairs and exited the room into a hallway that had dissolved into chaos. Men and women ran aimlessly around, some casting spells whilst others attempted to dress themselves as they headed towards the nearest exit. One thing was evident, and that was the uncertainty that had befallen them. They didn't know if they were under attack or if the wards had been tripped. "Where the fuck is Malfoy?" a shirtless man nearby asked another. "I don't know," the other stuttered. "Get out of my fucking way," the first growled as he barged the man aside. "Malfoy." The chaos ensued as Harry rushed through and was forced to ascend another staircase as another group charged towards him with their wands drawn. "Everybody outside! Auras!" a loud voice echoed throughout the building. The announcement sent the Death Eaters scurrying, clamoring to get out of the house where they would be trapped in case of a full frontal assault. To avoid the mob, Harry levitated himself towards the ceiling, taking a moment of pleasure by vanishing a staircase that a dozen or so were sprinting down. They collapsed in a heap and looked at one another in confusion. "Stop parsing around, you shits. Get out there," an angry voice commanded. Pushing the thoughts of the randomly vanishing staircase aside, they sprung to their feet to carry out their orders. Within moments, the majority of those within had spilled into the grounds with only a few left behind. When it was clearer, Harry allowed himself to drop back to the floor and sprinted off to check that one of the other key parts of his plan had been fruitful. Hastily, though careful not to miss anything, he scoured the third and fourth floor, pausing as he heard sobbing coming from a room with an open door a short distance away. With his wand braced and ready to use, he nudged it open with his foot and was met by the sight of two mops of platinum hair, one resting upon the chest of the other that lay unmoving. The creaking of the door opening caught the attention of the woman and her teary eyes shifted towards him before narrowing. "I hope you're happy," Narcissa hissed. "Not really," Harry replied uncaringly. "I wanted to kill him myself." "You should be grateful he died as he did, Narcissa. Were it left to me, he would have suffered much more." He gave a final look of disdain towards the bloodied corpse of Lucius Malfoy and to the large snake that lay dead beside him, a large blade protruding from its skull. "At least he finally did something worthwhile with his life, but I will keep my word. Your precious son will live, but listen to what I have to say, because I will not repeat it. If I get even a whiff of ill intention aimed at my family, I will kill you both, blood or not. Do I make myself clear?" Narcissa nodded nervously, the emerald eyes of the boy unsettling her. "Good. I would remain hidden until what is going on out there is over. It will unlikely be pretty." Not waiting for a rebuttal, he left the woman to mourn and felt a sudden chill overcome him as he entered the hallway. Frowning, he rushed to the frosted over window and wiped away the dew before peering through it. "Bollocks," he groaned, as he spotted a sizable swarm of Dementors descending towards the rear of the house. With a shake of his head, he blew out the window before jumping through it, slowing his fall with an elaborate wave of his wand. "Expecte Patronum," he roared as he hit the ground with a thump. His hydra careened from the tip of his wand, illuminating the rear of the property, flying towards the creatures and eliciting a series of unhappy screeches as it directed them away from the property. They would be a ministerial issue to handle at a later date. His priority now was to get to Tonks and the others that may need his help. With those thoughts in mind, he charged back inside and made his way to the front of the house, blasting open the main door upon his approach. The conflict that had been raging outside seemingly froze as he crossed the threshold, the Death Eaters to his right looking towards him with something akin to fear and the combined forces of the auras and the Order in awe. The ceasefire ended abruptly when a volley of curses was sent his way. Instinctively, he levitated a large amount of loose gravel from the driveway in front and intercepted the barrage. The remaining stones were transfigured into a collection of daggers and sent in the direction the attack had come from. Several Death Eaters were impaled on the makeshift blades and screamed in agony. The auras seized the newfound advantage, reinvigorated by his appearance, and continued with their own onslaught, causing the Death Eaters to shield or hide behind their barriers, leaving very little chance to return fire. Under the efforts of the opposing force, slowly but steadily the defenses buckled and more fell from either spells or exhaustion. The fighting had raged on for an inordinate amount of time until only a small pocket of resistance remained, no longer fighting with fervor or for the cause they had chosen, only for survival. Seeing that the Death Eaters were all but crippled, Harry ceased his own offense and rested the tip of his wand against his throat. "Enough! Voldemort is dead and you've already lost. Drop your wands and you will be taken in by the Aurorus, with no more harm done to you." "He's lying," a voice replied. "The Dark Lord is not dead." With a shake of his head, Harry removed one of the wrapped packages from within his pocket and resized it with a tap of his wand before levitating towards the small group that remained of Tom's followers. "If his head isn't enough proof for you, then you are much more stupid than I believed." One of the men, the same that had spoken out against him, retrieved the head and disappeared amongst his peers. In the moments that followed, a heated exchange took place amongst them, some adamant that he was lying whilst others were for surrendering. When the discussion had come to a head, another man stepped forward, this one calmer than the first. "Why should we believe you? This could be any head that you've transfigured." Harry huffed irritably. The man did raise a valid point. If he was alive and here, do you not think he would be doing all he could to kill me? Would he not do everything he could to prevent all the work he had done his whole life from being destroyed? I am offering you one chance only to escape with your lives. I would take it. Many seemed to be considering his offer, a smattering of murmuring breaking out amongst the enemy group. One man, however, was defiant and with an inaudible roar, pointed his wand towards Harry. "Avada Kedavra!" Harry intercepted the spell with a conjured chunk of marble and returned with a spell of his own. The man fell to his knees as blood began trickling from every orifice of his body. His comrades looked on as he bled out slowly, his veins visibly protruding until he fell still with a final gurgle. Witnessing the death of their comrade seemed to shake sense into most as they threw their wands to the ground and placed their hands atop their heads, their eyes fixed on the man that had no intention of complying. The man that had been negotiating with Harry called out in a foreign language and the rest of the Death Eaters followed suit, dropping their wands and surrendering to the Ministry forces. "Are there any others in the house?" Harry questioned. "There are prisoners in the dungeons and the men that were taken from Azkaban in the medical room. You'll need one of us to open them, but there won't be any resistance. They can barely talk, let alone fight back." Harry nodded as the contingency of horrors began approaching the group, his wand ready to strike should any be foolish enough to resume the fighting. Thankfully none did, and the horrors began rounding them up under the instructions of James Potter. Another group entered the home, taking the negotiator with them to retrieve the rest of the Death Eaters and the prisoners from within. Harry had little time for a reprieve as someone impacted against his chest, squeezing him tightly. "I promised, didn't I?" he muttered tiredly. Tonks nodded. "I always believed you." For a moment, the two were left to enjoy the warmth of one another until the clearing of a throat caught their attention. Spotting his father stood only a few feet away, his hair and robes in disarray from his own efforts. Harry broke the embrace with the woman and pulled the man into his arms instead. "Thank you," he whispered. "Where the bloody hell else would I be?" Harry chuckled as the man patted him heavily on the back. "I couldn't be prouder of you, Harry, for everything you've done." "I wouldn't be where I am without you," he returned sincerely. "If you hadn't come for me, Sirius silenced him with a shake of his head. None of that matters. You turned out all right in the end, even if you are a bit too much black for my liking. Again, Harry released a gentle laugh. It had always been a point of contention between them. Sirius had tried to make him less a traditional black than he had become, but in truth, it was inevitable. He had endured too much to be as happy-go-lucky as his father. Well, I'm not marrying a pureblood. That should count for something. Sirius's eyes widened at the revelation as he looked between his son and the metamorph. You've made your decision then. Harry nodded as he put an arm around Tonks' shoulder. I doubt anyone else would be able to put up with him. Tonks sighed. Sirius released a bark of laughter as Harry shook his head and scanned the area once more. Surprisingly, the house and grounds had survived the conflict mostly unscathed. It would take a little work to put right, but it was by no means a lost cause. At the very least, Draco and his mother would still have somewhere to live. He paused his observations as he spied a lone figure overlooking the work of the Auras. Even from the distance he stood, he could see the lost look adorning the features of the man. I'll be back, he assured Sirius and Tonks before approaching the man. James paid him no heed as he did so, his focus on the darkness far off and away from what was happening around him. It's over, he stated without emotion. Harry nodded. It is, he agreed. The man released a staggered breath of relief. So, what do we do now? You're the minister, Harry pointed out. Isn't that your job to decide? James snorted. Not for much longer. I have no intention of keeping this bloody job. It's back to the Auras for me. Government office not to your liking? The man shook his head. It's bloody boring, he whined. Honestly, I can't stand another meeting with a bunch of people's lips pressed against my arse. Harry laughed heartily at the statement. This was the James Potter that Sirius had tried to tell him about over the years. The man was not one for office work. He needed risk and excitement in his life. I would have thought having people worship you would be your thing. From what I heard, you used to love the attention. James shook his head morosely. People change, Harry. I'd give everything I have to go back even a year. Harry nodded his understanding. He'd be proud of you, he offered. He was always proud of you both, no matter what anyone else said. James gave him a grateful smile. I only took this job for him and for you. I know that it doesn't mean much after everything that has happened, but that is the truth. I know, Harry returned. He had no reason to doubt the man. Having gotten to know him and Lily somewhat over the past months, he had begun to accept that what he had been through hadn't truly been their fault. It had been easy to blame them when growing up, and perhaps he was right to in a way, but they could not be held responsible for what had happened. They had been a victim just as much as he had. They were ultimately good people who had done a damn good job raising his brother, despite everything they'd endured. I'm getting married, he announced, breaking the uncomfortable silence, and I'd really like you both to be there, not as the minister and his wife, but as invited guests. James smiled warmly at the offer and nodded. We'd like that, and Charlie would approve. He was fond of Tonks. The little shit would take the piss, Harry countered with a grin. He was too bloody smart for his own good. James snorted lightly. You know, he planned on getting you and Leo back for what you did to him when he tried to offer you romantic advice. We even had a good prank prepared. We just never got the chance to pull it off. Bastard, Harry grumbled good-naturedly. James released a deep breath as he looked at the boy. I'm pleased for you, Harry. I really am. Harry nodded gratefully, but frowned as James stopped himself from continuing. What is it? James shrugged nervously as he looked away and shook his head. I want to ask you something, but I'm scared that you'll think I'm doing it for the wrong reasons or that I'm trying to manipulate you. I've been manipulated far too many times to fall for it again, Harry bit back before calming himself. I know you well enough to know you wouldn't try that. What do you want? James gave him a nod of appreciation before speaking. I'd like you to accept being the heir to the Potter family. He held up a hand to prevent the impending outburst. I'm not saying you have to ever be Lord, but maybe one of your children or even one of theirs could continue the line. Despite how poor I have been, our family is an old one and has been led by great men. I would be remiss in my duties for not asking and prove to be a worse father if I didn't. You don't have to answer now or even in 5 years' time. The offer will always be there. Please, just think about it. I will, Harry assured the man with a sigh, a headache slowly forming. You'll get your invite to the wedding soon, I imagine. I look forward to it, Harry, James replied, offering the teen a hand. Harry shook it without reluctance, the first time he had welcomed any such gesture from the man. With seemingly little else left to say, he allowed the man to return to his duties for however much longer they would be his responsibility. He couldn't blame him for not wanting the post any longer. Being Minister of Magic was a thankless and stressful job. Are we finished here? Sirius asked as he returned to him and Tonks. Yeah, I just want to go home now. Giving a final glance around, he acknowledged a simple bow from Dumbledore with one of his own. He neither liked nor understood the headmaster, but he would unashamedly admit that his task would have been much more difficult without his assistance. They would never see eye to eye on most things, but he had developed a grudging respect for the eccentric wizard. It was with a sense of relief and peace that he apparated away from the Malfoy home. He felt lighter than he ever had, and perhaps some of that could be attributed to the lack of hate and disdain for certain people that had weighed him down his whole life. Now he had other things to focus on. He no longer needed to question just why he'd had to endure what he had when but a boy, nor the motivation behind such. Dumbledore had proven to not be the man that had plagued his nightmares, even more so than Tom had. He was a fool of a different, perhaps worse moral disposition, and the Potters had done nothing but fall victim to his machinations. To Harry, none of that mattered anymore. He had grown and he had moved on. There was none that could do such to him again. His only regret was that he'd lost his brother on the way, and though he had avenged the loss, he still missed the boy and always would. It was never a price that he would have been willing to pay, and the weight of his brother would always rest heavily on him. He knew that Charlie didn't blame him, and that knowledge is what made the weight bearable. I got him, Charlie, just as I promised I would. The feeling was reminiscent of the night of the Yule Ball. There she was, seated, waiting to be called forward to share a dance in front of a large crowd. The difference, however, was that this time it would be a dance shared with her husband. She smiled nervously as he led her on to the makeshift dance floor that had been placed in the atrium of the Ministry of Magic, a final arrangement courtesy of James Potter before he had handed in his resignation, having seen no purpose to continue in the role. Remember, it's just you and me, Harry whispered. Another reminder of their first dance together, eliciting another smile from the woman. Events such as these were things she would avoid, and he understood it was not something either relished, but as the lord of a prominent family, it was one of the expectations he would honor. Being pulled gently into his arms made the world around them disappear, and they settled into a comfortable rhythm, swaying and twirling around the floor whilst the large gathering looked on, most with something akin to happiness, others with jealousy. There were many that looked down their noses at her, but none that would dare voice such thoughts. The idea of provoking the Lord Black not being high on their list of priorities. The legacy of the family itself and the recent dismantling of the Dark Lord's operation courtesy of the latest Lord was enough to still the tongues of the disapproving. The months following the conclusion of the war had been hectic. Harry had been inundated with requests for interviews, hounded by the press and the public when he left home, and had even had to endure the plethora of marriage contracts that he'd been received from far and wide. That particular problem had been dealt with quickly and efficiently. It was the one time that Harry had talked to a journalist willingly, and Rita Skeeter received another boon to her career. He had emphatically denied all offers put forth and announced their own impending nuptials, much to the dismay and displeasure of many. Some took it as a personal slight against them, which, knowing Harry, it probably was. Others offered their congratulations, some more sincere than others, but the contracts stopped arriving. Had anyone pressed the issue, she had no doubt her intended would have taken it as a personal affront and escalated the situation if needed. Their personal dilemmas aside, Wizarding Britain had gone through significant change also. Many lords of the Wizengamot had been killed during the conflict, most of which coming from the more traditionally inclined politics. This meant that a power vacuum had occurred and some rather unflattering bills were close to being passed. The most drastic of these being that the new, younger lords of the families that had lost their lord would be subject to being placed under a mentor program, where they would be taught the practice of politics by other members of the Wizengamot. Harry had personally fought the implementation of the bill put forward by Amos Diggory. The man had used the recently ended conflict as a catalyst for his plan, and seemingly wanted to remove traditionalist views from the Wizengamot. In a well-publicized condemnation, Harry outright accused the man of attempting to subvert the British culture and eradicate democracy. His vitriol had been as expected from a black, ruthless, cutting and provocative. Thankfully, the bill was not passed, and the families that were viewed as dark from the other side were left to continue in their ways. Harry had explained that the balance between light and dark was needed, and one should not have autonomous power. The country would lose its way were that to happen, and it would only incite further conflict further down the line. Tonks was no politician, but balance was something that she could understand. If Diggory had gotten his way, it would only encourage more people to adopt extremist views in the long run. The last thing Britain needed was another Dark Lord to emerge in the future. She cleared her head of her thoughts by leaning against Harry's shoulder. She didn't want to dwell on politics or the war. She wanted to enjoy hers and Harry's day. Despite the need to wear a dress once again, she intended to do just. Arcturus watched proudly as Harry took his wife into his arms and began leading her around the floor. It was a strange sight to see, but a welcome one nonetheless. Had any told him that the broken little boy present to him so many years ago would grow into the man before him, he would have laughed in their faces. He had all but given up hope on the legacy of the family. Himself and many that had come before him had made many an error where the family was concerned, but not Harry. The boy had proven himself beyond any doubt that he was the right man to restore the family to their former glory. Arcturus rested easily now, knowing that the fate of his blood was in such capable hands. All that remained was for the line to continue, and he had no doubt it would do so. The Blacks would go from strength to strength with Harry at the helm, and even when the clammy grip of death claimed him, his face would adorn the same smirk he wore now, and he would go in comfort, peacefully, knowing that the name Black would live on through his chosen heir. "Are you crying?" Cassie whispered. "No," Sirius denied, wiping suspiciously at his eyes. Cassie took pity on the man and patted his shoulder comfortingly. "What's wrong?" Sirius shook his head. "Nothing. I'm happy for him. If anyone deserves it, it's him," he answered genuinely. Cassie nodded her agreement. The circumstances in which the boy had come into her life had not been ideal, but he had grown on her quickly and she had come to care for him just as much as she had any of her other nieces and nephews. He had proven himself, not just as a member of the family, but as one of the few greats that would rise with each passing generation, and as far as she was concerned, there was none greater than him. Time and time again he had overcome the odds, proved that he was tenacious, and proven many a doubter wrong. He was a strong man, and would only grow the more years he lived, for how many of them she herself would witness. She knew not, but it did not matter. She had watched him grow from that insecure, helpless little boy into the man that stood before her. "You've done a fine job with him," she praised. Such word a rarity from the woman. "You should be proud, Sirius. Damn proud of the job you did." Once the shock had worn off, Sirius gave her a nod of gratitude. It had not always been easy. Harry had been broken when they found him, and day after day had been a struggle at first. Not only that, the boy had proven to be just as mischievous as himself, and the man that had sired him, throwing Leo into the mix, had only developed that side to the boy. But it had been for the best. It may have been his newfound ability to use magic, meeting Leo, or a combination of the two that had seen him grow so quickly. Regardless, the raw potential he had was being nurtured, and he had exceeded all expectations. Always. Now he was but a man, and Sirius couldn't deny that he missed that little boy at times. "So, what's next for you?" Cassie questioned curiously. "I'm staying on at the school," he answered. "Those kids need a decent professor. Who better than a Black to teach them how to defend themselves against the dark arts?" "That's all well and good, but what about you? Aren't you ever going to settle down yourself?" Sirius shrugged as grin tugged at his lips. There's always a possibility, he replied, his eyes meeting those of Amelia Bones, who smirked in his direction from across the room. Do you remember our wedding day? Sarah asked her husband with a slight frown. The man grinned and nodded fondly. How could I forget? It was a great night, he declared. Ugh, I don't want to hear this, Katie muttered. Oh no, nothing like that happened, did it, Robert? Her mother pressed with a glare. The man had the decency to look abashed at the very least. What did happen? Leo broke in. This idiot got drunk and ended up brawling. He came to bed with a torn shirt covered in blood and passed out. Leo snickered. Sounds like a good night to me. The Bell females glared at him as Robert again smirked, this time going unnoticed by his wife. I did apologize, did I not? And I made it up to you. That is not the point, Sarah hissed. My only memory of our wedding day is of you scrapping like a schoolboy and bellowing like an ape. The man snorted, composing himself quickly under the unamused gaze of his spouse. Oh, come on, love. It's not like I can change it now. You could always renew your vows. Muggles do it all the time, Leo shrugged. Sarah's eye lit up at the idea and Robert groaned. You know, I was just starting to like you, and then you go and do something like this. Bloody hell, lad, think before you speak. Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, Sarah praised. We can do it again, and it will be a day I want to remember, she finished firmly. Robert relented with a huff. All right, we'll redo to the damned wedding, but if your brother says one word to me, I will floor the little bastard. Again, he warned. Sarah kissed the man on the cheek and gave him a winning smile. Don't worry, Robert, the two of you only fall out when you've had a few. This time, it won't be a problem because there will be no alcohol. The man was positively affronted by the words and his ire was aimed towards Leo. You see what you've done? Now I have to endure that Burke without a drop of the good stuff. Thanks very much. Oh, calm down, Robert. Is the thought of marrying me again so bad? Sarah asked. The man shook his head and smiled warmly, something that Leo considered to be alien. No, I couldn't think of anything I'd want more, the man sighed as he pulled the woman into his arms. Leaning over her shoulder, he gave Leo a conspiratorial wink. Get out whilst the going is good, he whispered. If you don't, this is you in 20 years, mark my words. Leo laughed as Sarah swatted her husband's shoulder. If in 20 years' time he had anything resembling that of the Bellas' marriage, he would be a very happy man. In the spirit of such a thought, he turned towards the girl that occupied his thoughts and took her hand, the two of them sharing in the moment of happiness. As she watched Harry's wife rest her head on his shoulder, Lily had to admit to herself that the occasion was bittersweet. She was truly happy for her son but couldn't help thinking that things should have been different. In a world where Voldemort hadn't attacked them, she would have been involved with planning and arranging the wedding. Harry would be readying himself to lead their family and Charlie would still be here, likely as Harry's best man. A tear escaped her as she smiled at the thought. I know, Lils, James comforted. So many what-if questions with no answers. Lily nodded. I am happy for him, she replied honestly. As am I. It doesn't change how we feel, though. I'm just pleased we are a part of his life now. Sirius has done a fine job. He has, Lily agreed. I'm grateful for what we have. She turned her attention to the empty seat next to them. In honor of his fallen brother, Harry had insisted on the spare seat. Charlie would have been in his element today, as both a comfort and a pain in the backside. There was no way he would have let this go ahead without pulling something. It was just who he was, especially when it came to Harry. As happy as Lily was that herself and James had managed to forge something with their elder son, knowing that their younger boy had the chance meant so much more. For Harry, the ceremony and reception were but a formality. There was no other he could imagine spending his life with, no other he would even consider. As he swayed with the woman in his arms, he realized that things had turned out rather well. There had been the unpleasantness of Diggory's proposals, and a little more when the need to elect a new minister had arisen. However, Wizarding Britain seemed to be thriving now that Tom and his followers had been dealt with once and for all. The aftermath, thankfully, had been rather minimal. Harry had barely been called upon for anything other than to give an account of the battle. No questions had been asked about his activities leading up to it, and he strongly suspected James Potter was behind this. Having the man elected to office had proven to be a boon beyond expectations. With those problems dealt with and before he could begin to live his life with his new bride, there was one other issue he had yet to address, and one he was not looking forward to. For the best part of 2 years, a prisoner had resided within the basement at Grimald Place, one that he had grown rather fond of in a familial way. He sighed as the realization hit that he could no longer put it off. Once his honeymoon was over, he would have to confront the situation and remedy it. For how long she had been held here, she didn't know. One day seamlessly bled into the next, and she had lost track of how many days, weeks, and months had passed since she had arrived. She wasn't by any means unhappy. She was far away from the Dementors after all. She did, however, find herself wondering about what kind of future she might have. Harry had given her the news that he had successfully killed her master. It had been a rather matter-of-fact revelation without a hint of smugness, nor regret. It was as though a business transaction had been complete, and he had benefited considerably more than the other side. She couldn't be sure about how she felt. She had been upset initially, had mourned for the man she had once viewed as her savior, but she hadn't been angry with the lord of her family. In truth, she had been proud. He had explained to her exactly how he had gone about the deed, and she couldn't help but feel that he had taken the best possible approach, best for the family at least. He himself seemed to be disappointed in a way that he had not engaged the Dark Lord in a duel, but to that end there were far too many risks. Her master was an excellent wizard, far beyond even those above average, and despite how gifted Harry undoubtedly was, he did not hold the advantage in such an eventuality. Her master had well over 5 decades of experience. On the younger man, and experience counted for much in a fight, especially when facing someone who had performed ritual upon ritual to ensure they remained at their peak. She shook her head at the thought. No, Harry had gone about it the way any black worth the name they carried would. That, however, left her with uncertainty about herself. What would Harry do with her? She couldn't very well live out her remaining days within these walls, could she? She wouldn't be opposed to the idea so long as she could at the very least experience fresh air once in a while and have her wand back. She could cope with such a life if necessary. Her one concern, however, was that he would wash his hands of her and have her sent back to Azkaban. Such a fate was not something she wanted to ponder. She had little doubt that if she were to return there she would die within a year. There was no hope of a master to rescue her, to keep her lucid, nor would there be any purpose to continuing existing for. She was strong, but none could survive the island without something worth surviving for. "What's bothering you?" A voice pulled her from her reverie. So lost in her thought as she was, she hadn't heard the approaching footsteps on the stairs. She found herself up at the Lord Black, his steely gaze not fitting in with the look of youth he still had. He no longer appeared as boyish as when they had first met, but he was young, far too young for such intensity. She, however, admired him for it. He was a strong man, had endured much and continued to grow only stronger. "Nothing," she denied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come off it, Bella. I might not know you see well, but even I am not that dense," he chuckled. She smiled at his attempt to lighten the mood. "I suppose I'm just wondering what will come of me." Harry nodded his understanding as he took a seat opposite her. "I've not kept you here out spite," he assured her. "I have been considering my options, and in all honesty none are particularly good. If I were to hand you over to the Auras, it would be known that I have held you. I could kill you, but you have given me no reason to. So, what have you decided? What would you like me to do?" "You could let me go," she suggested hopefully. Harry chuckled as he shook his head and stared at her speculatively. "It's been 15 years, Bella, but the world hasn't forgotten about you," he sighed. "If it wouldn't cause such a headache, I would. I don't care enough about the Longbottoms to fight for their justice, nor for whatever else you may have done. You were young, stupid too, but you made your choices, and I suppose I have made mine," he added thoughtfully. Bellatrix swallowed deeply as she waited for his verdict. "Come," he urged. "We will duel, and if you can beat me, I will allow you to walk out of the front door and no one will try to stop you." And if I lose, we will cross that bridge when we come to it, Harry replied not unkindly. And what wand will I use? Yours, of course, Harry answered as he drew a familiar wand from within his sleeve. I was planning on returning it to you today until I realized how much my reticence was bothering you. How did you get this? She asked as she took it in her grasp, the warmth of her magic pumping through her veins overwhelming her. Such a feeling brought a tear to her eyes. Azkaban, Harry answered simply. For such a well-protected place, it wasn't so difficult to break in. Thank you, she said sincerely, as she awkwardly pulled him into a hug. Don't thank me yet. You still have to show me why you are the most feared witch in Wizarding Britain, he reminded her as he opened the door and began ascending the steps. What about the wards? You're with me, they won't activate unless you give them a reason to, he assured her. Climbing a set of stairs was a strange feeling, something she had not experienced for the past decade and a half. Nonetheless, she managed it anyway, and found herself in the familiar hallways of Grimmauld Place. She had not been here since she had been in her early teenage years, when the house was run by her Aunt Walburga. If she was considered a loyal Death Eater, Walburga would be nothing short of a fanatic. Often, she could be heard spouting some spiel about the greatness of the man. Bellatrix had found the woman both strange and intolerable. She had never met the Dark Lord but had insisted her children dedicate themselves to his cause. Much to her displeasure, cousin Sirius had not listened, and had been ousted shortly after. She never would have believed he was the smart one of the family. It turns out that he had been the smartest of the bunch. Strange being here? Bellatrix nodded. I have a lot of memories here, some good and others not. Well, all of those you grew with are gone. Your mother, your father, Regulus. Your two sisters, Sirius, your grandfather and aunt are all that remain. Other than myself and Dora. And I's daughter, and my wife, Harry reminded her. All those that I looked up to, she sighed. They made poor choices. We have all done it and they paid the price. The family may not be what it once was, but it will continue to rise. I will see to that. Bellatrix believed him. He had never given her any reason to doubt him, and she wouldn't start now. He was the kind of man needed to re-establish the family as one of the greats. Nervous? He questioned with a grin, as he pushed open a door, revealing a suitably large enough space to hold a duel. I'm a bit out of practice, she mused aloud, but I think I can handle it. Harry smirked and gestured for her to take up her position on the opposite side of the room. Remember, if you win, you walk free. Anything goes. Anything? Bellatrix asked with a frown. Harry nodded seriously. Her frown deepened as she pondered the predicament she found herself in. If somehow she managed to kill him, her life would not be worth living. The rest of the family would not let such a transgression pass, and she would have nowhere to turn to. Nevertheless, she gave a shrug. She was not one to turn down a challenge, not even one that could cost her life. In the spirit of this, she fired off a couple of the spells her father had taught her from the family magic. Having spent several years under his tutelage, these were one that she had perfected. With little effort, he stepped aside to avoid them and released a flock of ravens from the tip of his wand. She braced herself for an attack that never came. Instead, they flew around him in circles, and he waited for her to make her next move. Scowling, she fired another string of curses his way, only to watch as a few of the birds broke away and took the spells before immediately being replaced by the 3 that had fallen. She growled as any reluctance to harm the boy vanished, and hurled curse after curse at him in quick succession, killing several more of the conjured animals, but failing to penetrate his defense in any way. It was effective, that she would admit she had never faced such a tactic, and it left her frustrated. Fight back, she demanded irritably. As you wish, he shrugged. Any look of amusement he had no longer adorned his features as he obliged her request. The birds that had been somewhat lazily flying around him paused briefly before speeding towards her. Instinctively she erected a wall of fire in front of her, and the smell of burning feathers and pained squawking could be heard. Her respite, however, was short-lived. To her surprise and dismay, her wall of fire became a block of ice, and through it she could see another swarm of birds heading her way. Her surprise only increased, however, when the bird that reached her cover first burst into an eerily green ball of fire, and she quickly found herself completely unprotected. She was not one to give up so easily, as she intended for him to find out. She again went on the offensive, destroying any of the birds that approached with an array of spells, finding her rhythm with her wand unexpectedly so quickly after such a long hiatus. It was but a blur, and Harry gave her a nod of respect. There were very few witches or wizards out there that could endure such an attack, let alone as ferociously as Bellatrix was. Becoming frustrated with the seemingly unending stream of flying creatures, she released a labored screech as an explosion escaped the tip of her wand. Every remaining bird gave a final caw of protest before they vanished, leaving in their wake only a plume of feathers. With a simple flick of his own wand, Harry transfigured them into knives and sent them in the direction of the woman. Instead of shielding as he'd expected her to, she whipped her own in an upwards motion, sending the blades into the ceiling above. Such a move was risky, and only one with unwavering confidence would attempt to intercept so many projectiles this way. If even an ounce of concentration was lost, it could prove to be fatal. He nodded his head respectfully as she panted, her body no longer accustomed to such rigor. "Good," he praised. "I can see why people would fear you, even if you are out of practice." "Still better than most," she heaved. "I won't disagree with that. Are you ready to continue?" Bellatrix gave a nod before continuing her onslaught, not wanting him to gain another advantage over her. She casted as she moved, twirling and spinning so not to be an easy target, and looked on in frustration as Harry barely moved, most of her efforts batted away as though each spell was not one that could cause him permanent harm. In the briefest of lull he returned with a plethora of spells, his accuracy and speed quite the sight to see. Had she not known the ability he possessed, she wouldn't have believed it. He was calm, finessed and deadly. Everything she had once been. She was still just older, and her body could no longer keep up. Perhaps it was this or the years in Azkaban, but the toll of the passing minutes had been taken, and it was only a matter of time before she made a mistake. It came only a moment later, and a misstep took her into the path of a bright red spell, rendering her unconscious. She woke after what could have only been a minute or so. Her breathing was still fast, and the room had the scent of burnt feathers and the warmth of still permeating magic. Her eyes turned towards the victor of the duel, and she deflated with a staggering breath. He stood, watching her calculatingly, a sweat not even visible on his brow. "You did well, Bella," he comforted. "I can't give you higher praise than that." She nodded, accepting her defeat. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but she could not deny the outcome. "So what will you do with me?" "The easiest thing to do would be to get rid of the problem." "You're going to kill me then?" Harry snorted as he shook his head. "No, Bella. You're my blood. I won't kill a member of my family unless they force my hand, and I won't hand you back to the Auras." "What then?" "I'm going to send you to one of our other properties away from Britain. You will receive more than enough gold to see you through, and I will ensure you have an elf. My only condition is that you do not return here and do not bring shame to the family. If necessary, I will come for you, and I will not be so forgiving." "You will let me go, just like that?" Harry nodded. "I won't keep you a prisoner. 15 years in Azkaban is suffering enough in my books. You're a black Bellatrix. I will always help those that carry our name the best I can." "I'm a Lestrange," she pointed out. "No, I saw to it that would change. I annulled your marriage, citing that many clauses in your contract were never met. You are once again officially one of us." Bellatrix sat up with a look of disbelief in her tear-filled eyes. "Thank you," she choked. "This isn't a reward. This is an opportunity for a new life. If I were you, I would take it with both hands and run. It is not an offer I make lightly, nor one you will ever get again." Bellatrix nodded her understanding. "You have a choice between Switzerland, France, or Italy. I'll give you a few days to decide, and then you will be gone. For the time being, you will be confined to your room." Gratefully, she stood and threw her arms around the young man and gave him a tight embrace. She had been certain she would spend the rest of her days on the forsaken island or within the four walls that had become her second prison. Harry had truly stuck his neck out for her, and she had no intention of making him regret it. As such, only 3 days later she waved goodbye to the shores of Wizarding Britain to begin a new life in Italy, where she could live out her remaining years in peace, with a name she was proud to carry and a powerful lord to look up to. Harry would visit from time to check on her, and the two would engage in either a duel or a game of chess as they had done so often in the past. She never managed to beat him at either, but she lived a life of contentment, never once regretting that she had been kept out of the war and away from her former master. 19 years later. Harry had readied himself for the day ahead, though every year this day proved to be as difficult as the previous year. One of the many lessons learned throughout his years was that loss followed you wherever you went, and no matter how much time had passed, he'd lost his grandfather and aunt before he'd turned 25, 2 deaths that weighed heavily on his conscience. None had suffered, and for that he was grateful. Arcturus had simply fallen asleep, never to wake, and Cassie very much the same. The loss of the man had been difficult to accept, and he had truly felt out of his depth for the first time in his life. No longer did he have that person to lean on for assistance when it came to running the family, the words of experience, nor the calming presence. It had been a tough period of adjustment for the man, but he had managed. He had held what remained of the family together, had guided them along the path he was forging, and still, they remained strong. The loss of Cassie had hit him hard, the same way that losing a mother would. It was another loss he'd had to bear whilst carrying the others with him. Leo had taken it the hardest. The man had been inconsolable for days after she had gone. He loved the woman who had raised him, and it had come as no surprise when his daughter had been born that she was given the name Cassiopeia in honor of her namesake. 2 sons had followed the girl only a few years later, blessed with the names Robert and Shane for each one of their grandfathers. Himself and Katie had elected to wait for family life. She wished to pursue her Quidditch career, which had been quite the success as it turns out, and he was happy to wait until the time was right for her. He was happy to take up a role as an advisor on the mind arts to the ministry, his years apprenticing under Cassie elevating to masterful levels. When time allowed, he also competed on the dueling circuit, never fully being able to ignore that itch to fight that had been instilled with him during his schooling years. Thankfully, however, the ICW never had need to call him up for formal service, and his years waiting for such an eventuality passed by. SIRIUS had continued on in his capacity as a professor, eventuality moving on to be the deputy head and head of his former house. Minerva McGonagall eventually retired after a decade as headmistress with Dumbledore's passing, and Sirius passed up the offer to take any of her positions further. The man loved to teach and had no desire to be sat in an office all day. Besides, he had his own home to return to each night, with a wife that was just as busy as himself waiting. It was seldom the two would get much time together, and accepting such a position would impede on it more than each of their jobs already did. He had eventually married Amelia Bones in a quick ceremony that had taken the public by surprise. There had been no formal announcement, no pomp nor circumstance. Only the very few members of the combined houses had attended, and the two had returned to their respective jobs the very next day. They never did have children, but the line of Bones continued through Amelia's niece, Susan, when she birthed 2 sons and a daughter of her own. Harry had been kept busy over the years with the state of the family, working consistently to elevate them back to former heights. His victory of Voldemort had been a boon, but a more personal one. He wanted a legacy to pass on to his own children that would see them stand above all others, as those that carried the name had once been. It was a difficult and endless task, one that his own heir and theirs after would have to continue. A legacy was not built on one great man. It would take several following to establish that. Another lesson he had learnt whilst navigating the perils of everyday life. Though hard at work, he did find time to pursue some things of interest. Occasionally he would enter the dueling circuit in disguise, and using a false name. His notoriety preceded him wherever he went, and this was a way that he could vent a little under the guise of another. When that person would begin to garner too much attention, they would vanish, and a newcomer would take their place some time later. He had no need for the prize money nor the reputation being such an excellent fighter offered. He had both in spades. It was the thrill of combat that attracted him, and the thrill of performing with those watching ignorant of his identity. To this end, he had even had reasonable success as a singer under the name Christopher White. That venture had begun as a forfeit to a bet he had lost with Leo. Neither expected the success that came, nor the demand for more. It had all come to an end when his wife had discovered it was him behind the moniker, and the thrill of performing was lost. Nevertheless, he was no longer shy to sing in front of her and had done so on several occasions throughout their marriage at her request, usually when she had been birthing one of the 5 children they shared or on their anniversary. It was one of those children that made today particularly important, and he was a mixture of nervous and tetchy to have the formality of the event done with. The fact that it was the date of the passing of his brother only added to his current feelings, though he would freely admit it was fitting. 3 boys and 2 girls himself and Dora had been blessed with, each a little of them both, and one metamorph, their second-born daughter having inherited the trait from her mother. Such a thing was rare, and even those that were won were not likely to pass the gift on to their children. There were no guarantees with magic, and to him this had proved it. His eldest, his firstborn son, had been quite the surprise. No discussion had been made to try for one, but it had happened anyway, and 6 months after the discovery that his wife was with child, Regulus Arcturus Black II had been born, named for the great-uncle that had died defying the Dark Lord. Next had come his first daughter only 2 years after. She had been named Calidora Andromeda Black, after a great-aunt who had been a revered healer and her grandmother who came to dote on them all. Ares had arrived a year later and Melania a year after him, bringing the total to 4. Arcturus had always spoken highly of his wife, and by all accounts had been a fine woman. It was fitting that her name would live on through them. His daughter proved to be much like the woman, stubborn, intelligent, and deeply caring for her family. Her choice of name had proven to be the right one. Ares was very much like his father. He was driven, hard-working, and not an ungifted boy. As the second son, he knew it was unlikely he would become lord, and he dedicated himself to his studies, so that his older brother would always have someone strong watching over him. The two shared a very strange relationship. At times they would annoy one another, and at others they were inseparable. These were the two that tested the parents the most, and the ones that had shown Harry how difficult fatherhood could be. For the first time in his life, he pitied his own father for having to tolerate all the things he had put the man through. It was the birth of their 5th son that had been the biggest surprise. After Melania, the couple had decided that 4 was enough. Fate, however, had other ideas. There had been no sign that Dora had been pregnant, no sickness, no cravings, and no swelling, until she had been almost 6 months along. Nevertheless, the two took it in their stride, and their son joined them a few moments later. It was this particular child that was occupying the thoughts of his father, and Harry couldn't help but look back at his arrival. Today would change things for the boy and for the family, but Harry knew he had made the right decision. The first time he held the boy in his arms, he knew. Flashback. As a man, no matter how many times your wife gives birth, waiting for the babe to arrive never becomes easier, never becomes less nerve-wracking. This was the 5th time that Harry was experiencing such a thing, and he fidgeted the same way he had during the first birth. He paced across the room as the healers went about their job, and he bit his fingernails down as far as they could go. It was a mixture of nervousness and excitement that gripped him, neither relenting until he was handed that bundle of blankets with one of his blood inside. Just one last push, and he will be here, the healer urged, positioned at the end of the bed as though waiting to catch a child that would come at her with speed. Harry bit the inside of his mouth to prevent the laughter forming at his observation. He doubted his wife would appreciate it. Any laughter died as a wailing sound filled the room, and the women went about cleaning up the leftovers of childbirth from the baby. Harry bounced on his toes impatiently until it was passed to his wife. As tired as she was, she gave him a smile and beckoned him forward. As calmly as his trembling legs would allow, he cleared the short distance between them and took the seat next to the bed, his mouth opening in surprise at the sight of the newest addition to their family. For the fifth time in his life, tears of joy welled and unashamedly glided down his cheeks as he took the little boy from his mother's arms and stared at him for several moments. "He looks like—" "I know," Tonks comforted. "We spoke about this, Harry. I've already given you my blessing. I can't think of a better way." Harry nodded as he stood and left the delivery room with his son tucked safely in his arms. As he entered the waiting room, he was accosted by someone who was less patient than himself. "Is everything all right? How's the little one?" Leo asked frantically. "Bloody hell, he's fine, Dora is fine, and you have a fifth godchild. Now bugger off, mother hen, there are other people for him to meet." A chastised Leo grumbled as he took a step back. It had been this way since the birth of their first child. Harry had never expected such a reaction from his friend when it came to children, but he should have. He cared for each of them as though they were his own, and he couldn't think of anyone better to watch over them should anything happen to him and Dora. "It's all right, little one," he whispered, as the baby began to fidget slightly in his wrappings. "There's a few people that would like to meet you. This," he began when he reached Sirius, "is your granddad Sirius and Nanny Amelia." The couple spent a few moments holding the boy before Harry claimed him back to move on to the next couple. "This is Granddad Teddy and Nanny Andy," he cooed. Andromeda almost snatched the boy from him in her excitement to meet the boy. "Oh, he is so sweet," she whispered as he yawned a toothless yawn. She eventually handed the babe back, though she did not appear happy to do so. "This idiot is the one you saw first. This is your Uncle Leo and your Auntie Katie. You'll see him a lot, so don't get too excited," he added under his breath. Leo heard him and glared at his friend before accepting the boy into his arms. He, however, didn't have long as his wife insisted it was her turn. Again, it took a little time before his son was handed back and he turned to the final couple in the room. "This is your Nanny Lily and Grandad James," he introduced them. The Potters looked on proudly at the boy and Lily almost squealed as Harry placed him in her arms. She looked at the babe and then back at Harry in surprise. "I'd like you all to meet Charles Henry Potter," he announced, those within the room falling silently in shock at the declaration. "He is your heir, James, named for the son you lost and for my brother." The man released a choked sob as he all but fell into Harry's arms. He had never truly forged a parental bond with them, but they had become incredibly important over the years. He had gotten to know them for who they were, and they had proven themselves. Both were gifted in their own right, and had never given him a reason to doubt them. It was one of the other lessons he had taken to heart that had seen him forgive the pair. In truth, they had done nothing wrong other than put their faith and trust in the wrong person. They had suffered for their foolishness, had lost their son because of it, and Harry didn't have the heart to see them suffer any further. He had grown close to the Potters, had grown to love them as he did any other person of import in his life. He had discussed this with Dora, had explained the request that James had made, and she had agreed with him. He was a black, would always be a black and look out for the best interests of the blacks, but somewhere inside him was Potter, and it would be remiss to forget that because of mistakes those that had sired him made when they were young. Holding his third son only reiterated that notion, and the fact that he resembled his late brother only solidified his decision. "I don't know what to say," James choked. "There's nothing you need to say. It's the right thing to do, and I am proud that my son will one day continue your line." James nodded gratefully before taking his heir into his arms and smiling. He had thought Harry had forgotten about the request he made all those years ago, had even accepted it. Today, however, he had proven just how much of a good man he had grown into, and James would forever treasure the trust he'd been shown. End flashback. "We'll be late if you don't all get a move on," Harry called up the stairs in grim old place as he checked his watch. "We won't be late, Harry," Tonks assured him as she came downstairs. "You look as beautiful as ever," he complimented. "Being a metamorph has its perks," she sighed as he pressed a kiss against her head. "Without all of this, I don't look as I used to," she added, gesturing to her red hair and unblemished skin. "Without all of that, you are the woman I fell in love with and married," Harry countered. "I look forward to seeing her every night." Tonks gave him a smile before kissing him on the lips. "Do you have to do that? It's disgusting," Melania grumbled as she joined them. "I will remind you of that when you have a boyfriend," Harry returned, eliciting a look of disgust at the thought from the girl. "Huh, If you had your way, Dad, she'd never have a boyfriend. I can't imagine too many people wanting to try to impress the great Harry Black just to put up with her, Regulus commented as the rest of the children joined them. The joys of being scary, Harry lamented. You're not scary, Calidora denied. I still remember when you pretended to be my unicorn. And such knowledge stays within these walls, Harry insisted. Imagine the outcry it would cause if anyone knew that the great Lord Black had once been a unicorn. Shut up, Dad, Ares sighed. You were the one moaning that we'd be late, and here you are holding us up. Harry narrowed his eyes at the boy. You used to be fun, he muttered. Well, some of us have the task of keeping this brat out of trouble, Ares replied, jerking a thumb in the direction of his older brother. That one spent too much time with Uncle Leo and Grandad Sirius, Harry conceded. Will they be there today? Tonks questioned. I expect so. They haven't missed one yet. Are you ready for today, Charlie? The youngest of his children nodded. Are you going to be sad? The boy asked. I don't like it when you're sad. I'll try not to be, Harry answered, wrapping an arm around the boy as he removed the portkey from within his robes. Everyone grab on. When the entire family had taken hold of the piece of rope, he activated it and they vanished with the familiar feeling of being hooked by the navel. They appeared in the churchyard at Godric's Hollow and were greeted by the sight of the Potters, Sirius, Leo and Remus Lupin. Harry had never gotten to know the man beyond the exchange of pleasantries, but he had been Charlie's godfather and had always attended the yearly gathering they held for the boy. Remus will take you into the church and we will join you shortly, James explained. Charlie, you will come with us along with your father. The boy nodded nervously and held Harry's hand tightly in his own. You'll be fine, Harry assured him as they followed James and Lily across the graveyard and into the warded-off area where those bearing the Potter name rested. Every year, Harry would join the pair to pay their respects to his brother, would speak about how life was going and inevitably lament at how much he missed the boy. This year was different, however. This year his own son would take up his place officially as the heir of the family. He held the boy back as Lily and James went about saying their piece respectively, each taking a few moments by the head of the grave. When it was his turn, he led Charlie with him and whispered his own words under his breath before conjuring a wooden stag and placing it on the ground below. This is who you were named for, Charlie. I know, Charlie answered sadly. Uncle Charlie was your brother and it makes you sad that he's gone. Harry nodded. It does, but have I ever told you about him? The boy shook his head. His was a kind boy, the kindest you would ever meet and very brave. A very bad man came for us, and your uncle died protecting me. I loved him and owe him my life. If it wasn't for him, things would be very different. Neither you or your brothers and sisters would be here. Is that why you're famous? Because you got the bad man? It is, Harry clarified. I got the bad man that killed your uncle. I'm glad you killed him, Dad. Uncle Charlie sounds like he was a nice person. He was, Harry sighed as a tear broke free. You have a very big name to live up to, little one. Do you think you can manage it? The boy looked uncertain until his father pulled him into his arms. I know you can, Harry whispered. You are just as kind and brave as he was. You have a very important job, just as important as Regulus, and you will have me and Grandad James to help you. I know you will be fine, son. You're like your uncle in so many ways. That is the best start you can hope for. I think I can do it, Charlie whispered. Good. Now come. Grandad James has been waiting a very long time for this day. The boy nodded and allowed himself to be led towards his grandparents. Harry looked on as his son accepted the airship with a proud smile on his lips. He was proud of the boy, proud of all his children and the people they were growing up to be, but most of all, he was happy. He had his family, he had his friends, and both lines that he considered his own would continue to prosper long after he was gone. There was nothing more he could ask for other than things that he could never have. I'll see you again, brother, he sighed internally as he followed the other three towards the church in the distance.